Right, hello YouTube. I'm going to share screen. I might play this one later. It's an hour and 40. I'm not interested in those two. I don't understand why that individual feels he needs to do his debate preparations live, blah blah. Anyway, I might listen to this one first. This is a more recent video. Doctrinal labels. It's linked under the YouTube thingy. It's on Rumble. I posted it on there. I was going to listen to a certain after show, but I can't be bothered with it, really. Why on earth they'd want a toxic Calvinist in there, I don't know, but there you go, that's up to them. I'm not complaining. I just wouldn't do it. Alright, let's go with this. Oh, Jamie Russell. You really hit some very big things in a precise way. At some point, I commented that was heavy, and then clicked that, whatever that. I mean, I don't know what he's trying to say there. Yeah, and the title of this video is Doctrinal Labels. Jamie gives himself the label of Seventh-day Adventist. Kevin Thompson's aware of it. Say Jamie's in a cult, or we won't watch your channel anymore. I don't care if you say that, if you think that, but I imagine you aren't interested in that mindset based on what you teach. It is weird how much I totally agree with what you are saying regarding what Christianity should bring and what holds it back. You just have a different theological framework through viewing the realities and possibilities. Yeah, right. Jamie, you struggle with reality all the time. You're a Seventh-day Adventist, Ellen G. White, boffin. Kevin isn't interested in that. I don't speak for him, but you are in a cult. Seventh-day Adventism is a cult. So is Calvinism, so is Catholicism, long list, Universalism. Yeah. Anyway, let's play this. I really aren't interested in what Jamie has to say most of the time. Just curious to see who'd commented. Oh, ugly old goat. Oh, right. Kevin Thompson is blind, leading the blind. Yeah, right. Oh, I'm not reading all that, Gubbins. Let's have a look at what he is. See if he's a... I bet he's a Calvitard. I can almost guarantee it. About page. Let's have a look at that. uglygoldcoat.com. Boring. It's all about Bitcoin. Oh, he's from Mexico. Oh, he's all about money. Yeah. I'm not going to show you his webpage. Why should I? I wonder if Dave goes into that stream. He probably will. Yeah, that'll be fun, won't it? He'll probably start singing Catholic liturgy. Oh, let's just make this full screen. Ben did a short video.
All right. I think that we are live.
Yeah, hold on. Ben did a short video which he deleted. I don't know why, Ben. Well, he either deleted it or hid it. I'll be there in a sec. I'm just playing about a little bit. You'll have to excuse me. Look, don't let me put you off going in and arguing with Calvinists, Ben. You know, it's up to you. Lesson learned, no more arguments with Calvinists. If only, Calvinist, Ben. Spell it. Universalism. As soon as you get in the so-called debate arena with Calvinists, all the dirty tricks that they did on you when you went in Jamie Russell's channel, they will do with you, Ben. Every time. Weckl, Synagogue, Ryan the Presbyterian, Sky Out, absolute mess. You got your timing wrong, Ben.
Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. In this video, we want to answer some questions from a viewer who asked questions about labels. And the question's actually a pretty good question. So we'll get to it. Let me plug the channel real quick. If you enjoy the content that you get here, we invite you to support the channel financially.
Yeah.
The details to do so.
I'll pause this so you can check. The email address is showing there is to his PayPal. I don't know if it works with these other two. Cash App. There's his Venmo name, Cash App name. I'd love to see Kevin doing this full time. I'm not a sycophant for Kevin Thompson. I'm learning something every time he does a video. I watch one of his videos, or at least finding out stuff, or being reminded of other stuff he said. I'm not an expert on Calvinism, and it isn't all about Calvinism. So
are in the description below this video. Zelle, PayPal, Wise, Venmo, Cash App. If you like seeing this continue, or you're getting anything from it, please let us know with a little bit of support. That helps keep us going and helps us grow. It takes a lot of time, space, resources, energy, and funding to get into this. To provide you the content that you get here, you know that you're not going to find it anywhere else. Okay, so we're cutting edge thinking here at Beyond the Fundamentals. Now we have a question from, let's
have a look at Rumble a minute. Piet Pompis is there again. Non-denominationalism can surely also be called a cult. Well, I wouldn't even call myself non-denominational, right? Yeah, you can play. You're playing about with nuances there. It seems that's up to you. Uh, I don't belong, or I'm not a member of a denomination. I'm just a King James Bible believing Christian. That's it. Uh, if people don't like it tough, they can either attack the King James Bible, the Word of God, or they can attack me, which wouldn't be unusual. I understand what you're saying. Of course I do. Uh, is Christianity a group mentality? Well, if you've seen all the arguments on YouTube between various Christians on YouTube, you realise that they don't have a sort of group mentality. A lot of them don't use the King James Bible. A lot of them do, quite a few of them. I won't use anything other. If you look up the definition of cult, I'm sure you can call any group of people a cult or a group mentality or some sort of religious sect. I'm not going to argue that point with you. Going back to this, doctrinal labels. Thank you for sharing your opinion, making a comment. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I said this because I actually forgot to redact one little name here from the email. We double check and make sure. We have a question from a viewer in an email, and they said something like this. They said,
Oh, yes.
once again, thank you for your ministry. And this is today, this is the 11th. This was sent on the 11th. If you send me an email, I will do my best to keep you anonymous unless you ask otherwise. So, good morning, Kevin. Once again, thanks for what you do. It's encouragement, so I appreciate that. I was listening to your recent video released on August 6th talking about Calvinism's new brand. In this video, you give examples, and it's talking about 3-dot theology. Okay,
Yeah.
So we've done some other things with respect
Hegelian dialectic
to not related to Calvinism as well. So that's important to understand that in order to answer this question. Some people, if you come to this channel and you only watch the Calvinist stuff, there's a lot of other content that I personally think is way more important than the Calvinist stuff. And if you're not familiar with that, you might miss some of the points that we're trying to make. Okay, so I'm going to take the point today to try to clue into some of that. In your video released last year about Arminian and Bayesian Calvinism, around the 2-minute 20-second mark, you discourage the use of belief system labels, yes, and suggest rather the use of labeling related to a study method or procedure, yes. Where are my 4 kinds of knowing? So if you have a label, I'm not exactly against labels per se, but I think that having a label that is descriptive of static propositions. What do you mean by that? Where's my
statement of faith? The Catechism of Calvinism, which is Tulip, of course, and there's other catechisms, Provisionism, and then there's Daisy, Roses, there's a couple of others I can't remember. Claims on truth, yeah.
where's my Grudem theology prop over here? Let me get my Grudem theology prop,
Yeah.
and something like this. Oh, here's another one. Here's a good one here. There's actually a few good ones here. If you, where are we now? Yeah, this is proposition only label. Okay, this guy's a Calvinist. Grudem systematic theology. This paper here is on replacement theology. I don't know if you can see that very well on replacement theology. Okay.
Supersessionism.
So replacement theology doesn't matter what dispensational, whatever. No, dispensationalism, if it's done right, it's a little different. But like replacement theology is it's a static set of beliefs. It's not
Like the Westminster Confession, the London Doodah Calvinist garbage.
going anywhere or doing anything.
Just
If you are attached to it, it doesn't change replacement theology. If you wad it up and throw it in the trash can and have never heard of it, it doesn't change replacement theology. You don't do anything to replacement theology. It doesn't do anything to you except colonize your mind. Okay, and I'm not talking about replacement theology. I'm talking about anything. Here's covenant theology. What does covenant theology want to do? It wants to colonize your mind. Okay, so we are not in favor of things that colonize the mind. If you want, so when it comes to Calvinism, provisionism, any of the denominations, your statement of faith, a confession of faith, all that stuff colonizes the mind. We don't want labels that are of static propositions down here in propositional knowing. Now, that doesn't mean that we're against propositional knowing. We are against proposition only knowing, okay?
Yeah.
The problem in the meaning crisis, this entire society has become very left hemisphere centric. We see things in small slices and bits. We can't see the whole. We can't see the context. And the church is no different. We're taking our cues. We're exactly like the world. We're taking our cues right from the world, not doing anything different. And so in that way, we are conformed to the world.
Yeah, I don't like I've never done a statement of faith on my channel. I could do. I just don't like this labeling stuff. I've never done it. I just stick to I don't like other people telling me how to believe something. I've got a Bible. I've got my King James Bible. I don't need other people to come and tell me what to believe or how to comprehend it or how I should understand it. I don't mind listening to what others have to say. I might discuss things with other Christians. Just bear in mind that you're not my teacher, any of you. Don't care who you are. Don't care how long you've been a Christian. I don't know everything. I'm not an island. I do look up things and, listen to what other people say. But you're not my teacher. You're never going to be. You're not my elder. You're never going to be. These statements of faith, I've had this in chapel, in prison actually. You read out a liturgy and you've got to answer this, in the same responses and it's enough to drain the fluid out of your spine.
Look in some of the comments here. Just been taking a break from YouTube for a while. Time for some Grudem squats. Yeah, we're starting a workout program soon where instead of weights, we lift Grudem books. Okay. And we're going to have all kinds of devices. We've got like a sled. You can walk backwards and pull a Grudem sled. We have a Grudem ab master coming up.
Yeah. Wayne Grudem, systematic theology. I know I make this point regularly. I do want people to just take it on board, have a look. Wayne Grudem is a Calvinist. He was on the editorial board for the ESV, the extremely satanic version. Systematic theology, I would retitle that and call it mechanistic theology. So-called theology. What a pile of poison.
So we don't mind if you were to have labels somewhere up here might be fine. Now, I was under some pressure to try to have some labels. About the same time provisionism came out, I was actually trying to think of a label of what we do here at Beyond the Fundamentals that is not Arminianism, that is not Calvinism, is something else. And I was really close to like something like provisionism or traditionalism. I was really close to coming out with a word for it, a label for it, which was if you remember the 35 truths that destroy Calvinism, it was right around that time that I was trying to coalesce all of that stuff into something that had a label. And that would have been a huge, huge, huge mistake. Like, do not do that, okay? You want to have a label. So if I were to make a label for myself right now, let's just make a new slide. And you've heard of non-denominational, right? But they're still paradigmatic. They still have a statement of faith, and then it's almost like non-denominational is a denomination. So we're not going to say non-denominational, but we are going to say, like, maybe we're non-paradigmatic, and maybe we're meta-paradigmatic, or that's what we're aim is to be. Non-paradigmatic or meta-paradigmatic. Transformation oriented follower of the way that is Christ. Something like that. Okay. Another label that I thought of that is in the procedural knowing space was, let me make this bigger. You guys probably can't see that. I know some of y'all just old and can't see anything. I'm just messing with you. Another, yeah, that's kind of long, right? But you understand the problem here. Another one I thought about, okay, the inductive method is a method of interpreting scripture. Okay. Mother. I was actually on the phone with my mother just before this. Talk to mother, that's funny. Inductive method. So if you were to have a label for that, it might be the inductive method practitioner, you see? And so if I were to label myself this way, am I labeling that wrong? There we go. I always need these things to fix me. Inductive method practitioner. So if I were to label myself this way, I'm labeled based on a procedure that I'm doing, and I'm not labeled on some of the findings of that procedure, you see? So if I'm a provisionist, maybe I used a label here. Maybe I used the inductive method and I came up and this resulted in what could be called provisionism.
Oh.
Or traditionalism, something like that. Let's say that we did that. But that is...
Jamie Russell deleted his comments. I wonder, Jamie, are you listening? Seventh-day Adventist much? Jamie? Oh dear. Deleted your comments. I'm going to double check that because I find it funny. I do, I can't help it. I'll come back later. I'll double check. No big deal. I'm not sat here gloating or thinking I've got some, Yeah, I don't really want to. Yeah, okay.
Is at that
he has deleted
current level of growth.
Don't worry though, Jamie. I've recorded it. I read it out. A bit late, you dummy.
Growth. Transformation. And visibility. Or ability to see. Or we could call this perspectival capacity. Let's go back and call it perspectival capacity, okay? Because we have videos on seeing clearly. And all the stuff that we're talking about right now, um, the videos that I would recommend you watch: The Insecurity of Growth, The Savor of Death, Limbic Hijack and Christian Dogma, OSAS versus Perseverance of the Saints. We have a couple of videos on provisionism.
Yeah.
Before all this, we had videos on seeing clearly and belief is not what you think. And before all that, we had a video on the Mammon Church, Faith Crisis Part 1 and 2. Highly encourage you to watch this stuff, and you're going to be able to follow along with what we're trying to do here, okay?
Yeah.
So the problem with doing the inductive method, it's fine, but with the inductive method, okay, let's say you pick up the Bible, okay? You employ the inductive method of scripture interpretation, and you are like, I think provisionism is true. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is you do not want to stay stuck there. You want to have the capacity to deal with novelty as you encounter it on the fly. And you have to be able to nurture that capacity. Let me give you an example. If you teach kids how to sight read, they're not very good at reading new words at all. But if you teach kids phonics when they are learning to read, they can encounter new words and sort them out. And as they grow and learn, they can actually dice it up and pretty much get the meaning just from looking at the syllables. And if not that, especially the context. Okay. And so you get better at reading the syllables that are thrown at you for a bunch of new words all the time. So you can get pretty good at reading new words, new things thrown at you. So what you want to do is you want to be you want to be the kind of person that can have that can engage with novelty and update your system all the time. Now, what happens when you result in provisionism? What happens after that is that you're like, well, that's true. So then you become attached to it. You identify with it. You becomes part of your ego. And when I say ego, I'm not talking about being conceited and arrogant and prideful. I'm talking about basically the part of us that everyone else interacts with as us. Okay? Now that's the problem here. That's one of the biggest problems. Once you become attached to it, once you identify with it, once you're part of your ego, and you have in-groups associated with it, in-group membership is tied to whether or not, is tied to whether or not you are in compliance with the set of beliefs. Now you have all these reasons to stick with this static thing, which is something you could perceive at that current level of growth. Okay? And that's a huge problem. We don't want to do that. We have it's good to see Joseph Carter. We have him in the comments here. Let me see if I can bring the comments up for a second. Configure to. Yep, that looks about right. Joseph Carter says, I think the label started out as a signal for something transcendent and got turned into its own religion somewhere along the way, kind of like the snake on a pole with the Israelites. It's kind of interesting. I do have a name for what you're doing. Aletheity, love for truth. And so the same thing. So aletheia is the Greek word for truth. So aletheity, love for truth. It's the same thing that I'm doing. Okay, that'd be a good label, something like that. So it's maybe philosophy, for example, is an interesting label because it's the love of wisdom. And so this word would be something like that. Caleb says, thanks for the super chat, Caleb. Appreciate all the recent content. A lot to catch up on. Absolutely. Appreciate it. So yeah, these are some very interesting comments. So those are some good ideas. If you were to have the label philosophy would be identifying something that you're engaged in, the love of and pursuit of wisdom, without tying you down to any particular set of conclusions. See, stage 3 Christians, when they hear philosophy, because they are tied to a set of conclusions. They think that philosophy is an alternative set of conclusions that people believe. That's not what philosophy is. Okay? All philosophy is being intentional about life. That's all it is. If you are trying to be a Christian and trying to live right and make good choices, you are engaged in philosophy. It's just the degree of
If you love wisdom, yeah.
intentionality that you bring to it. That's
I
all
could
it
agree
is.
with that, I think, yeah.
And that's all psychology is bringing intentionality to how your mind works. It's bringing intentionality and attention, intention and attention toward how you live and what's the best way to live. That's philosophy. And then bringing attention and intention to how the mind works. That's psychology. So if you're doing that in the Bible, if you're engaged with cleaning up the mind, for example, and casting down all the strongholds and every thought that exalts itself against God Almighty and bring them into captivity. If you're engaged in that, you are engaged in psychology. So the problem with landing on a particular place is that you will grow out of that and it will not grow. And you're like, well, I'm going to modify it and that kind of thing. Well, I'm telling you, thanks for the super chat, Susan. Also, I really appreciate it. That really helps. So thanks. You will not grow. You will be stagnant. You will stay. You will be stuck. Okay. So in his question, he goes on to ask, in your video released about Arminian Bayesian Calvinism at around the 2-minute, 20-minute, you discourage the use of belief system labels and suggest rather the use of a label relating to a study or method or procedure. In a couple discussions I have had with friends that have mentioned Leighton his provisionism, I have pointed to your videos and discouraged using of labels. But now your recent video seems to be encouraging the use of belief labels and the need to be truthful. I wonder how these two concepts work together. I hesitate to identify myself with some label, but I don't want to be deceptive as well. I want to ask questions for the questioner and get to the root of the label being used. There we go. I was talking with, and he lists the person's name a couple of days ago, referring to your 806 video, the August 6th video, in your report that even in pastor search interviews, people were being deceptive. I thought that instead of asking someone their agreement or disagreement with a label, the search committee could actually ask for a brief understanding or presentation of scripture, a particular passage. And what he's getting at here is that Calvinists are really slick and sly, and they're constantly trying to find a way to lie about their Calvinism. We even showed a video how a 7-point Calvinist, he was asked if he was a Calvinist, and instead of honestly answering yes, he said, "What do you mean by Calvinism?" And they said, and they gave the definition that he disagreed with and said, "Well, then by that definition, no, I'm not." You see how he slipped and slid his way through there on a technicality? And the people on the pulpit search committees, unfortunately, they're not that prepared. I mean, they're generally smart people in other areas. Maybe they're a mechanic and they're really good at working on cars. Maybe they're a lawyer, whatever they are. They're just not really focused on the intricacies of Western evangelical propositionally semantically disambiguated conclusion-based dogma. They're just not very well dressed in how all that works. And so it's easy to use language to slip and slide around their ignorance, to slip in anyway, even though it's very clear that their intent was to not have one of you. Okay? It's very clear what their intent is. But you slip through there anyway. It's deceptive. And then he says, if someone really wanted to deceive through a search committee, it would be easy enough to modify the presentation of that passage to hide the Calvinistic belief anyway. Anyway, just wondering how we balance the use of labels. I guess this whole situation also emphasizes your claim that many times the non-Calvinist promotes Calvinism with their assumptions and less than accurate terminology. So here's what I'm going to say. Okay, let's go back to this slide we just made on provisionism. If you hold to provisionism and you disagree with the warnings that I've given you and you're like, I love provisionism, it's great, that's what I see when I read the Bible. If that's you, then use a label. Call yourself a provisionist. I fully advocate that people who do have a label that is propositionally normative. See, what do you mean by that? That means I can use propositions to normalize within the paradigm. Whereas something like this, inductive method practitioner, that would be procedurally normative. See how you would ascend this hierarchy by how well you do that procedure at every stage of growth, always increasing your perspectival capacity, hopefully. But if you are stuck in a static formed propositional knowing, then how well you can propagate, defend, cleverly defend, propagate, and endure. So a paradigm, you're going to have different things that a paradigm does for you. I have this on one of the slides, on this other slide deck over here. In the, at least I thought I had it, in the upper left-hand corner of this slide deck. The paradigm has three functions: to respond to reality, to conserve the paradigm, and to respond to novelty. So there are different kinds of memes within the paradigm, right? And to...
I'm going to screenshot that. I'm not sure how long you're going to keep it up.
Start pairing.
I'm not sure how long you're going to keep it up on screen, but I'm going to get a screenshot. Oh, I'll do it in a minute. Oh, it's always awkward.
To conserve the paradigm, that is...
Speaker, just... Why did it cut out at just the point in time when they don't want it to? I'm going to have to get a new speaker sorted out somewhere. One that I can just plug in instead of using Bluetooth.
Bluetooth connected.
I've got a lead, but it's a bit short, so...
Of this slide deck, the paradigm has three functions: to respond to reality, to conserve the paradigm, and to respond to novelty. So there are different kinds of memes within the paradigm, right? And to conserve the paradigm, that takes priority, because over time, now let me go back to this other slideshow. We're going to paste it in here. Okay. We're going to go beyond the four kinds of knowing, below the four kinds of knowing. And we're going to look at a paradigm's three functions. We're going to make them a little bit bigger. And you have to understand, if you're responding to reality, that's great. Let's say your paradigm includes something about gravity.
Sorry,
and
I just got to do this because I want a screenshot
of this slide deck. The paradigm has three functions: to respond to reality, to conserve the paradigm, and to respond to novelty. So there are different kinds of memes within the paradigm, right? And to conserve the paradigm, that takes priority, because over time, now let me go back to this other slideshow. We're going to paste it in here.
Get away.
Okay.
Leave it up longer.
We're going to go beyond the four kinds of knowing, below the four kinds of knowing. And we're going to look at a paradigm's three functions, right? And
you're going to have to excuse me. I'm making sure that I get a screenshot one way or the other. I could come back later and do it. I know that, but I'm not going.
This slide deck. The paradigm has three functions: to respond to reality, to conserve the paradigm, and to respond to novelty. So there are different kinds of memes within the paradigm, right? And to conserve the paradigm, that takes priority, because over time, now let me go back to this other slideshow. We're going to paste it in here. Okay. We're going to go beyond the four kinds of knowing, below the four kinds of knowing. And we're going to look at a paradigm's three functions. We're going to make them a little bit bigger. And you have to understand, if you're responding to reality, that's great. Let's say your paradigm includes something about gravity, and this stops you from falling off buildings, and it stops apples from falling on your head. great. It helps you respond to reality. The minute that it doesn't, you need to revise the paradigm. Okay. And then respond to novelty is, oh, there's something else in the paradigm. There's something else that's going on that I didn't understand. Yes, I'm still falling off a building, and yes, an apple will fall on my head, but there's a bird flying through the air. Apparently, not everybody and everything interacts with gravity in the exact same way, or there is a different order of something in the arena that causes people to be able to defy this thing that causes people to fall. So now I'm going to update my paradigm with some things can fly. I don't know why, but gravity tends to affect most things except these things that can fly. And then you start to study why. Why is that? And then you learn about air and wind and all this kind of stuff. And then here's the big one here. So if you're doing these things with your paradigm, eventually your paradigm will no longer be recognizable because it will change so much. But the problem that we have, what's our problem? That's not it. Problem is that we get attached to the paradigm. We identify with the paradigm. It becomes part of our ego. It becomes part of in-group membership. Now, this happens outside of theology, too. This happens in the scientific realm. They say that science progresses one funeral at a time because of this exact same thing. Once you develop, like Newtonian physics, taking a lot of while, and then you have relativity, then you have quantum physics and string theory, and you have people that are attached to all these different theories, and they die hard. They stick around for a long time. The guy who discovered that the speed of light was finite, it took the scientific community 50 years to accept that the speed of light was finite and not infinite, like instantaneous. Like there's no lag. Actually, there's a lag. It takes 8 minutes for the light from the sun to get to us. They thought that was crazy and bizarre. They couldn't imagine that. The closest star, the light that you're looking at, actually happened 4 years ago. Okay, they can't understand that. But eventually, 50 years later, they came to understand this. And then, so what happens is there's another function of a paradigm, and that is to conserve the paradigm. And that becomes the main thing. And what happens over time is that you stop responding to reality and you stop responding to novelty. So as you are conserving the paradigm, you are going to do a couple things. You're going to defend the paradigm. So you have defense memes. We're going to call them memes. You have propagation memes. We got to spread this bad boy, and endurance memes. And there's probably a couple others, but this will do for now. And whenever you have something like provisionism or Calvinism, how well can you defend it? Well, you're going to be a James White, okay? How well can you propagate it? How well can you convince other people to be persuaded of it? That causes you to ascend up the hierarchy of the in group. And what can you do to help people endure in the paradigm? Because what you don't want people to come to the cognitive level of awareness where let me make this a little smaller now so we can see it, okay? Where they start to question the central meme of the paradigm. That's what you're trying to avoid, basically. That's why you have endurance memes. How do I get people to stick with the paradigm? That's what Calvinism is doing. That's what provisionism is doing. They're all doing this thing, and they are all elevating conserve the paradigm. Let me make all this a little bit.
Let me just pause this, because a particularly toxic Calvinist has turned up on a certain stream. Just wonder what they're going to say about that. Yeah, enough of that. Just wondered if he was going to get a spanking on that channel, but I doubt it. Yeah.
Can make these things a little bit smaller
Sorry
so you
about
can
that.
understand how this all fits in how this works. You see? Anytime you adapt and anytime you latch on to something at this level, this is what automatically happens. Now, what you don't understand, might not understand, is that the paradigm colonizes your mind.
Brainwashing. I'm going to have a look at that later. Just curious about a certain thing, that's all.
And you don't have a say in the matter. Anytime you adapt and anytime you latch on to something at this level, this is what automatically happens. Now, what you don't understand, might not understand, is that the paradigm colonizes your mind. And you don't have a say in the matter. This is one area where you do not have free will. Once you start seeing the paradigm, you can't unsee it. And that's why 2 Timothy 2, if peradventure God will grant them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth, who are taken captive by the devil at his will. Okay? So all the things that are associated with this label over here, and you're going to get rivalry, you're going to get resentment, all these things. You don't realize the role that these kinds of things play in getting you to stick to your belief system. And you would never choose. You see, you would never, if you ask a Calvinist, why are you a Calvinist? They're not going to give you these reasons. If I ask a provisionist, why are you a provisionist, or why have you stayed a provisionist? That's why, but they won't give you those reasons because they don't know that. But that is what's so. That is why you stay that way. And that's why proposition-based labels are so dangerous, because they trap you and you can never get out. They trend toward rivalry, which trends toward resentment and the doubling down of attachment identity. And the resentment causes you to justify narratives which bolster the resentment, right? Justify narratives that bolster the resentment. Well, if you're living in a narrative that is not reality, what is that? The technical term for that is psychosis. Okay. Another word for that is delusion. So when we're dealing with a paradigm, if you optimize to conserve the paradigm over and above responding to reality and over and above responding to novelty, the technical word for that is delusion. I'm not trying to be sensational or insulting. That is the technical name for that. And the reason you're going to wind up in delusion when you've latched onto a paradigm like provisionism is because of these things which you can't stop and neither can you detect them. Notice when, if you're a provisionist, notice when I speak about the dangers of provisionism, how it makes you feel like fight or flight mode, how it makes you feel a little angry, a little testy, a little resentful, like you want to get back, it's something like that. That's your attachment. It's because you're identified with it. It's because when you're so identified with provisionism that when I talk about it, your body is reacting as if your identity is physically being harmed, or like you're finding out that Hitler was your dad, something like that. It's like it's shaking your identity to the core. That's why you react that way, and that's why you guys send the little silly little comments that you send. And what provisionists tell me when they send their comments is they're telling me all this. That's what they're telling me. Okay. So when is this appropriate to use a propositionally normative label? So now these slides come from this video here that we just did recently called Why Christians Can't Encounter God. Okay. So what we're going to talk about here is some of these diagrams. If I can't go over this whole thing again, but down here at the bottom, I've got your Presbyterians, your Lutherans, your Baptists, Provisionism, Calvinism, Arminianism, Mormonism, JW, Catholic, non-denominational, and all the ones that I left out. Whatever church you're a member of, put it there too. Okay, same thing. It's all the same thing. I'm not a Mormon. Look, it's all the same category of thing. They're all doing the same thing. They are all doing, okay, what are they doing? They're all doing the paradigm dance. They're all doing it, and they're all in delusion. All of them. They're wearing VR goggles, which is why I have the VR goggles down here. At this level, you have base model VR goggles, but down here you have highly specialized, highly customized VR goggles, but they're still VR goggles. They're still taking you far away from reality, just in a much more detailed way. Okay. If a person is down here, okay, they should use a label. They should be honest about their label. Yes, I am a Calvinist. Or like J.D. Martin says, he came on the channel, he says, I like to call myself Reformed, but I don't mind if you call me a Calvinist. Okay, that kind of thing. The Calvinists who say, Calvinists think that everyone who's not a Calvinist is an Arminian, okay? Because they can't think of operating outside this construct. And it's important to go back and watch this video so that you hear me build this up, okay? They're in this mindset over here. They're very left hemisphere. They don't understand how somebody can operate outside that construct. So they think everybody who's not a Calvinist is an Arminian, which is like saying everyone who doesn't drive a Suburban is driving a GMC Yukon. It's the stupidest thing you've ever heard of in your life. Maybe somebody's driving a Toyota, or somebody's in a Cessna, or they're on a boat, or they're walking, or they're in SpaceX flying around on Mars somewhere. You know, I mean, to think that your little dichotomy of the Yukon and the Suburban are the only two things that are out there is remedial, to say the least. So when they do that, what they're demonstrating when they say that is that they are trapped inside this way of thinking. They think that nobody else does that. They think, well, if you're not this label, you must be this other label, that kind of thing. So if you are on this side of the spectrum, labels are right for you. Okay. Let's go. Let me put it another way. If you've seen the Mammon Church video, let me go over here. If you are down here on the bottom side, which would be your provisionist and your Calvinist, you're very heavy in propositional knowing at the expense of the other three kinds of knowing. It's disproportionately emphasized in how you go about perceiving the world. then you should be using a propositionally normative label if you are down here. And they should not be lying about it. So when a Calvinist shows up, be like, oh, no, you're a Calvinist. Okay. People up here, yeah, you can label them something like that, something that would be reflective of the top three kinds of knowing, not proposition only, or all four kinds of knowing, something like that, like aletheity, something like Seraphim said a little while ago, or an inductive method practitioner. Joel Carson said, follower of Jesus Christ, okay, follower of the way, all right. Servant of the Most High is something that he said, that kind of thing. So serving is a procedural thing. It's participatory. You have to have attunement with the arena. It's perspectival. So servant, that might not be a bad label. Now, it's a little frustrating because it doesn't clarify a whole lot, and it does not distinguish you from these guys who would describe themselves the same way. Oh, I'm also a servant of the Most High. I'm also a follower of Jesus Christ. So the problem is that it's not distinctive from the Mammon Church arena. Okay, it's not untrue. It's just not distinctive. You say, what are you talking about? In the comment section, we had Joel, and Joel's a good guy. He came on and talked about Calvinism. So these are true: follower of Jesus Christ, servant of the Most High. The problem is they're not distinctive enough to separate you in the minds of other people from these fools down here who would also call themselves servants of the Most High and followers of Jesus. Okay. So if you look at our growth model here, if you are over here, if you are first tier consciousness, first half of life wisdom, then then a propositionally normative label like Calvinism or provisionism is appropriate, and you should be honest about it. If you are over here, then those kinds of labels aren't appropriate. If you are in second half of life wisdom, second tier consciousness, those kinds of labels are not appropriate over here. They don't do it justice. They don't do justice to what's happening over here. It's a completely different kind of thing, right? If you look at the 6 stages of growth, as laid out by Fowler and Kohlberg, those guys, which is another way, like at stage 3 and up, okay, would be second half of life wisdom. I mean, stage 4 and up. So what I'm trying to say is this: stage 3 and down. Stage 1 through 3 would be like first half of life wisdom over here. Okay, that's what we're saying. So in that scenario, yes, a proposition normative label would be appropriate. So the problem with the Western Evangelical Church is that the only thing that it has, it lives down here in stages 1 through 3. It does not live up there in stages 4 through 6. So notice they have a statement of faith. They have propositional dogmatism. Something else I need to add here. I thought I added it on another version of this. They have, they're very moralistic, okay? They have a master story. They have attachment, rivalry. There's backstabbing going on. There's legalism. They would burn people at the stake if they could. They have debate. It's very in-group, extensive, intensive, okay? They have systematic theology like this, okay? That is all your provisionism, Calvinism folks. That's where they live. They cannot see past that. So in that arena, if you are there, a propositionally normative label is appropriate, and you should be honest about it, okay? If you're up here, maybe there's some kind of label that's appropriate for it, but not like theirs. Not like theirs, okay? It's a different kind of thing. It's a different kind of thing. Over here, if you're a Calvinist or provisionist, you're over here. Go ahead and use labels. If you're over here, propositionally normative labels are not appropriate. That's not what's going on. It's two different things. So, static beliefs and dynamic faith. I can make this over here. And I've showed these slides before, but in light of labels, a label, if you're following a propositionally normative label, so what do you mean by that? Like Calvinist, Provisionist, Catholic, Mormon, Baptist, Lutheran, okay? All these kinds of things. They're all the same. Then your beliefs are codified once or period, or they're codified once or they are periodically and rarely changed. Like when was the London Baptist Confession last updated? 1689. When was the Baptist Faith and Message last updated? The year 2000. It's been 23 years. And before that, it was like 1963, I think. Okay? A long time. A long time to not update things. In dynamic faith, beliefs are held in possibility space and are constantly updated. So if I don't have a set of beliefs that I'm attached to or identified with, then what set are you going to label me with? You see? It's not that I have static beliefs that are different and I just don't like labels. It's that propositionally normative labels are not appropriate for that kind of thing. And there needs to be labels that are normative above the proposition space and knowing. In static beliefs, your values and affirmations, you have values, it values, it's a verb there. Static beliefs, they value affirmations of abstractions of reality. Here's how the universe is put together in the metaphysical realm. Over in dynamic faith, we value engagement with reality as we can perceive it at the level of development that we are currently at. Okay. In your static beliefs, and of course you're oriented upward to the degree that you can be, facilitated horizontally. Looking at some comments down here as well. Are we having some troubles? I'm looking to see if there's some issues with some folks. Yeah. So ask Kevin if SDA is a cult, please. Don't take my word for it. Look up the word cult when you get a chance, and you'll find out that it's any group of people who are adhering together as a group based on having the same beliefs. That is
Of
the
course, it's
definition
a
of a
cult, Jamie.
So
I
anybody,
can't see the side chart, but I know for a fact that that's Jamie. Jamie Russell commenting, that's up to him in the side chart there. Yeah, and he's deleted his 2 comments that he posted on here, which I read out earlier.
that is together because of the same static propositional beliefs is a cult. Anybody, okay? Includes the Baptists, includes anybody. They fit the definition of cult. So when people use the word cult connotatively in the United States, okay, they're usually talking about something that is kind of aberrant or crazy or following a particular leader or different than the rest. Different than the rest of what? The rest of the cults, okay? So we basically group together the ones that are more alike than different and the ones that have a little different perspective. We call them cults. But, look up the definition. But that's why any of that stuff exists over here. Exists over here in stage 3 area. So we value engagement with reality. It's in the static side, propositions, beliefs are the normative features of in-groups. Over here, love, being, and practice are the normative features of in-groups. It's a different kind of thing. See, I'm not over on this side, you're going to go up to a church, you're going to say, what are your beliefs? What do you believe? Over here, you're going to say, how do you practice? See, it's a different kind of thing. And maybe you can put a label on the practice. Okay, how do you practice? That's fine, but it needs to not be propositionally normative label. Over here, you have monoperspectival factionalism. Everyone's got their own little perspective, like the provisionists are against the Calvinists and they're against all these people. Over here, we have multi-perspectival cooperation. But the only way you can have that, you say, well, how come you don't tolerate the Calvinistic perspective? Because it's one perspective, and we can hear from it as a group and a whole. We don't need individual Calvinists to reiterate it to us. It has already said what it has to say. The egregore speaks for itself. What we need are people who have graduated from this and are post-paradigmatic, meta-paradigmatic, non-paradigmatic. And we need to hear their authentic perspective, not the one they've outsourced to the paradigm. Okay? So a provisionist can only give you the provisionist perspective. And once they're ensconced in it and identify with it for so long, they don't even know what their own perspective is. They can't tell you. They don't have one. They're not a real boy. They're a puppet. Okay? They're pre-transformational. So we're looking for multi-perspectival cooperation, not just getting together of the different denominations, but people who have been lifted out of that paradigmatic thinking and actually have their own authentic, genuine perspective to share. That's the perspective we're interested in, not the denominational perspectives, not the propositionally normalized perspectives. We've already heard those. Okay? Formula comparison, judgment on this side. Over here, you have discernment, orientation, alignment. Which way should I be pointing and going? Over here, it's formulaic, copied, and conventional. Over here, it's unconventional, spontaneous, and original. On static beliefs, the positions are held firmly. Over here in dynamic, the positions, if held, are very adaptable, very malleable. And so because of that, it's misleading to, you wouldn't call yourself a provisionist, because if your views, your positions are so adaptable, then eventually it no longer fits the provisionism mold. Over here, they have to follow rules because they have no wisdom. Over here, they have wisdom and no need for rules. As people hear you say that, a stage 3 person hears you say that, first tier consciousness person hears you say that, and they're like, oh, well, you're just using that to justify your sin, and that they just don't understand what's going on. And what we're talking about is the incapacity, the inability for rules to pre-specify relevance in a highly adaptive fitness landscape that cannot be predicted. Okay, you have a complex, dynamic fitness landscape. Static rules are inappropriate for engagement with that. Wisdom is what's appropriate for engagement with that. Static rules cannot pre-specify relevance for a dynamic fitness landscape, a dynamic, complex fitness landscape. It can't do it. And so rules are for the nest period of life. We'll talk about that. So where are we? We're on the rules portion. That might be a good point to talk about that nest portion of life. We talked about in those videos how the first part of your life should be characterized by rigidity and rules and maybe some beliefs and a few things like this. And then eventually it's time to get kicked out of the nest. Okay, here's the nest over here. Okay, so what is this? First half of life wisdom, first tier consciousness, stage 3 and below in Fowler. If you're a provisionist, Calvinist, etc. and so forth, this is where you are. Okay, it is appropriate to have labels over here because labels are for these kinds of things. So that's fine to have a label over here. Over here, a label is the inappropriate thing. A propositionally normative label is an inappropriate thing to do for this. I'm going to make a version of this that has like a little bird's nest over here. But here's where you get kicked out of the nest and you actually have to fly. Over here, you're still in the nest and you don't know how to fly. That's why you think people can't function without rules. You're like, how are atheists going to know what to do? They're not going to know how to be moral without God. Well, I don't advocate that kind of thinking from Christians. Okay, you're still in the nest. You are thinking that you can't have morality and ethics unless it's dictated to you from outside, externally, imposed upon you or upon people. It's because you have never tasted wisdom. That's why you think that way. Where were we down here? Okay, we were at rules versus wisdom. Over here, you have explicit propositions. Over here, we're more interested in seeing clearly. So I'm juxtaposing exactly one for one here to try to help you see left hemisphere versus whole brain functionality here. Over here, it's all important about scalability and mass production. We have to be able to put everything we believe in a book, and we have to be able to send thousands of our young men and women to seminary, and we indoctrinate them with this stuff, and then they can come back and maintain the institution and spread and propagate it and defend it and cause people to endure in it. Notice that? Notice that? What is that? That's delusion. That's what that is. You have a whole entire system based on delusion. But what are we trying to do instead? Careful cultivation. Over here, on scalability and mass production, you're going to build a seminary and you're going to send thousands of people to it. Over here, it's the Count of Monte Cristo in prison with Anthony Hopkins. It does not scale well. It's Danielson with Mr. Miyagi. It does not scale well. It is Luke Skywalker with Yoda. It does not scale well. You understand? Okay, careful cultivation. And if it does scale well, I don't know how to do it. Maybe there is a way. You know, my wife showed me a video not long ago, and the overall context of the video was talking about like school shooters and why people turn sour and do terrible things like that. And then they showed some other places where, like, there's a place in Australia, and then there was a couple places in the United States where they're teaching kids to like understand the feelings that are in their body and be able to articulate it and specify it at a very young age. I mean, I saw these 5-year-olds talking about articulately how they felt in a sense that lets you know they knew how to listen to their body. Okay, and I know that whole phrase, "talk about your feelings." You need to be very fluent in what your body's trying to tell you. You need to learn how to speak its language, and it speaks in the language of feelings. Have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. That's what Hebrews chapter 5 tells you. So over in static beliefs, they're interested in being victorious in rivalry. Over here, in dynamic faith, we're interested in corresponding with reality. We're not trying to be victorious in rivalry. I don't need to beat James White in a debate or anything like that. I'm just concerned with corresponding with reality. And I may need I need help. I need other people's help, other people's perspectives to help me better correspond with reality more and more every day. And if everyone has outsourced, when I go to church, everyone has outsourced their perspective to provisionism, or maybe it's a big umbrella and you have provisionism and Calvinism. Whoop-de-doo, I got two perspectives. I got 300 people in the church. I ought to have 300 perspectives, but no, you've got two. What has it done to you? It has effectively killed you. It has effectively stifled your agency to where you have no parallax to offer to the rest of the body, nothing to offer to edify anybody, because you are trapped in a paradigm that has colonized your mind. Now there are only two perspectives in your big umbrella church that has both Calvinism and provisionism in it. Why not 300 or however many members are in your church? If you've got 476 members in your church, you ought to have 476 opportunities for perspective to help people grow. But when you tell people, when a propositionally normalized label system of belief becomes the threshold of entry and maintenance in the group, you are stifling those perspectives, and you need those perspectives to grow. You need them. Like a plant needs sunshine for the photosynthesis and the chlorophyll to work, you need alternative perspectives. You need to be exposed to them regularly, all the time. And when the criteria of joining the church is to outsource your perspective for this one, there's no point in getting together anymore. You ever wonder why you're not getting anything out of church? Because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. On the static beliefs, they are aimless and disoriented. Everyone's walking around wondering, what's the will of God for my life? And nobody knows. Over here, we're following what Paul said. He said, follow me as I'm a follower of Christ. And he is pressing toward the mark of Christ as the way. We're following the pattern of Christ, order, disorder, reorder. I just heard a passage that I heard differently for the first time. This happens a lot. And I can't remember what it was, but it made this pop into my head. And it was a passage that often gets used for just typical evangelical conversion, the point where they mentally affirmed the propositions that we think are true about Jesus and that kind of stuff. But then I heard it in a different way, which caused me to realize the pattern of Christ in this. Maybe that was what was in the mind of the writer. I can't think of the passage though. I just heard it last night, or I think Paula and I might have been talking about it. It's crazy. On static beliefs, you're edified in broadcast modality. One guy's doing the preaching, everybody else is doing the listening. In dynamic faith, you're edified in a peer-to-peer modality like we do in FSI, like we're trying to do in FSI here on this channel on Wednesday nights, which last Wednesday night was broadcast live. Okay, and you can go back and watch that. Look for the FSI discussion from the 9th. It's on the channel right now. You can watch a group of us have a discussion. And there's nobody trying to tell everybody what they're supposed to think and believe in order to be righteous and moral. And there's nobody making anybody feel immoral for not towing the line of what of the opinion everyone's supposed to hold. Okay? So that's a different kind of thing altogether. Static beliefs, you're aligned with a belief system. In dynamic faith, your alignment with the way that is in Christ. You're more trying to be aligned with like being in attunement with a flow of a river that is highly volatile so that you can navigate it properly. That's what it's like being aligned with Christ. It's like that kind of thing. It's not a static belief system. When you jump in a whitewater raft, there's no need to affirm certain beliefs and doctrines. There's a need to perform. Okay? You have to shift your balance the right way. You have to paddle the right way. Okay? You have to perform. So it's more performance based than persuasion alignment based. Down here on the static side, they're concerned with worshiping Christ correctly. Over here in dynamic faith, we're concerned with following Christ faithfully. Okay? Everyone's a lot of people have said this, that a lot of people of faith, what they're doing is they're all pointing at the moon, right? And then what we religious people do is, instead of just looking at the moon, we all argue who has the best finger that's pointing to it. We worship better than you do. Look at what they're pointing to. Look at what they're pointing to. Okay. So I hope I've been clear with answering this question. I'm looking through some other slides here to see. Here's another one that might be interesting. As you grow, if you have a good growth trajectory and you break out of the nest, this is another depiction. Like down here would be the nest or first tier consciousness or something like that. That is where propositionally normative labels would be appropriate. If you are in one, admit it. And if you have graduated from that way of being or really having mode, come out of that as well. Okay. All right, where are we? Let's look at a few comments. See how that goes. Kevin is on fire. We'll see. Those who create systematics have good intentions, but it doesn't create disciples, critical thinkers. That's exactly right, Susan. And I agree with that. I think people who write systematic theologies, like Adam Harwood came out with one not long ago. Adam Harwood's a good guy trying to do a good thing. He just doesn't realize that that's not the right thing to do. But since he thinks that that's the right thing to do, that's what he has spent his time doing. And what we need to get Christians to realize is what is the right thing to be the right kind of thing to be doing. And generating static conclusions isn't the right kind of thing to be doing. It actually is more harmful to the body. Says I actually agree with that beyond the fundamentals, but I would say that we need to understand it comes from what God says. Conceptually, God is the boss, but wants people developed who just happily love. Interesting. Roberta says we're empty nesters. That's like a pun. I like that.
Oh, there's Chris Lucas.
And then there's people arguing about SDA. Oh, Seraphim, thanks for the super chat. The Tao of Kevin, huh? That would be a cult. We're not trying to do that. I like Anastasophy, the wisdom of resurrection. Okay, like the Anastasophy. See, I had to use my phonics and encounter novelty there, which I frequently have to do when I'm reading things from Seraphim. I'm constantly learning words. Anastasophy, the wisdom of the resurrection. So, like order, disorder, reorder, that whole pattern, which I think is in this slide deck somewhere, where we listed. Nope, not that one. Might be in a different. This is the slide deck. Here it is. Of life, death, resurrection, order, disorder, reorder, effort, failure, success, life, death, life, upward movement, humiliation, exaltation, structure, chaos, restructure, harmony, turbulence, harmonize, that kind of thing. So that anastasophy, anastasophy. Makes me want to look that up right now. What's going on with anastasophy? What other comments do we have? Good meaning, but sounds ugly. Anastasophy. I don't know. I like all those syllables. I think that if you were to say those syllables a whole bunch of times in a row, you might start speaking in tongues. Maybe that's the path. Maybe that's the window. It's a gateway drug. What else do we have? Christophy. Somebody said makes me think of theosophy, though. Well, I know what's coming next. So, Old Goat, where Kevin has imposed a...
Yeah, it was me that mentioned theosophy.
Good death, life, upward movement, humiliation, exaltation, structure, chaos, restructure, harmony, turbulence, harmonize.
I want to take
that kind of... Might be in a different... This is the slide deck. Here it is. Of life, death, resurrection, order, disorder, reorder, effort, failure, success, life, death, life, upward movement, humiliation, exaltation, structure, chaos, restructure, harmony, turbulence, harmonize, that kind of thing. So that anastasophy, anastasophy. Makes me want to look that up right now. What's going on with anastasophy? What other comments do we have? Good meaning, but sounds ugly. Anastasophy. I don't know. I like all those syllables. I think that if you were to say those syllables a whole bunch of times in a row, you might start speaking in tongues. Maybe that's the path. Maybe that's the window. It's a gateway drug. What else do we have? Christophy. Somebody said makes me think of theosophy, though. Well, I know what's coming next. So, Old Goat, where Kevin has imposed a hierarchy between the kinds of knowing. Oh, where has Kevin imposed a hierarchy between the kinds of knowing? Kevin denies Scripture, has a monopoly on truth, also known as sola scriptura by those of us imprisoned within the lowest form on knowing. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I've never made a claim to have a monopoly on truth. As a matter of fact, my advocacy for multi-perspectival knowing is that you need to listen to a lot of people. That's why we have FSI. We have FSI so other people can come speak, because I don't have a monopoly on truth and I need to hear from other people just like everybody else needs to hear from other people. Kevin denies scripture. I'm not aware of any scripture that I deny, so that's interesting. Also known as sola scriptura. So I've also never known people who like to use the banner of sola scriptura who actually practiced it, which is interesting. All right, so back to the question that was originally asked. What do I have over here? Yeah. Right.
What are you on about, Jamie?
So we're talking about labels. The question was about labels. That was the email from the viewer. So it kind of sounds like a contradiction, and I get that. So, I mean, it is a good question. It is a good question because it does kind of sound like a contradiction where I'm saying, we should not use labels. And on the other hand, I'm telling people, look, if you're this label, you need to admit it and stick to it, that kind of thing. And that's what this video is for, to try to explain the difference between those kinds of things. I think that if you are first tier consciousness, stage 1 through 3, and you're in a Baptist church, call yourself a Baptist. If you're a provisionist and you think that's true, call yourself a provisionist and don't lie about it. If you're a Calvinist, call yourself a Calvinist. But the goal is for all these people to come out of that kind of proposition centric. We want people to come out of this side of the chart, and we want to come over here where instead of having a list of beliefs and being left hemispheric and all this kind of stuff, that we have frequent, repeated experiences with God. That's what we want. We want to have beginner's mind. We want to be transformation oriented. We want to employ first principles thinking. We want to be oriented vertically, facilitated horizontally, pushing inward, the whole know thyself thing, which we showed all kinds of passages for, in case we have the moralistic folks are still in the congregation. Our conclusions that we have are provisional and temporary. What does that mean? In other words, if I'm going to have a conversation with somebody who is capable of having a good faith conversation, we're going to define our terms up front and then stick to them, okay? So if I'm talking to a Calvinist, let's agree on what sovereignty means. Let's agree on what faith means. Let's agree on what not by works means. Let's agree on what the word grace means. And then we're going to have that conversation. And then if I go have a conversation with somebody else, those words will not have those same meanings in the other conversation. I've had, there's some presentations that I've given where I've made a distinction between judgment and discernment. Well, that doesn't mean that you take that particular distinction with you for the rest of your life every time you see those words. It was for the sake of that conversation. In a different context, you might be able to use those two words interchangeably. But for the sake of that conversation, I distinguished between them so that I could make a point. Okay? So that's the kind of thing, when we're having conclusions, they're provisional and temporary. Oftentimes I will go back, if I'm dealing with Calvinists, I don't think they're ready to hear, I don't know, I just don't think they're ready for a lot of things. So they need somebody who is at least thinking on this side of the chart. And so I will talk to them as someone from this side of the chart in a way designed to try to make them think. Not driving them, not using sophistry to try to drive them toward a particular thing that I think, but just to try to shake them loose from what they are thinking, to get them to see the problem with it. And then attachments are noted and avoided, which is not like the other side. Identity is a relationship with the future. Try to walk in all four kinds of knowing. And we also realize that salvation, and over here, salvation is like this transactional thing that seals your soul into heaven. And over here, salvation is that and much, 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 much more. It's actually the way of Christ permeates everything all the time, everywhere, for all time. There's no getting away from it. But you have to learn to see it. You have to learn to interact with it. You have to learn to flow with it. You have to learn to go with the flow of it and not swim against the current. Once you start to see it, you can start to become part of it. That's what we want to see happen. Got a few more comments over here. Oh yeah, the hook. There was this Catholic guy. Who's this guy? Veritax. There was a Catholic guy, had a video a few days ago, and he was ripping into the concept of eternal security and lumping one save, only save with lumping one saved, only save with perseverance. That's a typical mistake people make. Actually, by the way, we have a video on that specifically. Where is that? You want to see the difference between OSAS and Perseverance of the Saints. We give you a stage 3 and a stage 5 perspective in that video there. OSAS versus Perseverance of the Saints happened not long ago. It came soon to a city near you. Reading the text, I think being able to understand what happens when things are put together does matter. Otherwise, it's just memorization. The elect are everyone except the Calvinists. Sometimes I've taken that approach with them, with Calvinists, in a Proverbs 26, 4-5 way of dealing with them. What else do we have? All right, that's the end of the comments. So we're going to go put that away for now. So thanks for the question, email viewer, who shall remain unnamed. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody who's in the chat. Thanks for everybody who watched the video. And remember to support the channel if you get a chance. Couldn't do this without you. And much more content coming soon. I'm going to try to put something together for Sunday morning, maybe at 9 a.m., maybe later. But keep your eyes peeled for that. Shoot me an email. Join our Facebook page. Subscribe to the channel. Do all the things. Hit the bell icon. Do all the things. Share these videos. Cram them down other people's throats. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and good day.
I'm going to go and have a quick look at the channel. I'm not going to put a link to it. Go find it for yourself. A certain sodomite. I don't hate them.